Welcome to SiViLNet. This is your host, Eric Hacopian. We're very pleased to be at the headquarters of ServiceTitan, one of the tech stars of Armenia, and we are very pleased to have as our guests, actually to be the guests of Ara Mahdessian and Vahe Kuzoyan, the president and CEO of ServiceTitan. Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
What we wanted to start with is, many people have heard the name of your company, but I don't think they understand what you do. So I wanted to give you a chance to explain fundamentally what is the business that you're in, and to tell us a little bit about yourselves and your personal backgrounds.
Yeah, you bet. ServiceTitan is software for contractors. Contractors that do plumbing work, air conditioning work, electrical services work, or generally any type of service that they provide in improving or servicing a house or a commercial property. These contractors use our software to run every aspect of their business. It helps the technician that is at the home do their job. It helps the office coordinate all the technicians to all the homes they need to go to, and it helps the owner manage their business from a high level. Vahe and I actually have a very similar story. Both of us, of course, are Armenian. Both of us are first-generation immigrants to the US. Our parents brought us to America when we were very, very young. Similar story, they came with no money, no job, no knowledge of the language. And they had to start a life and do all kinds of hard jobs to make ends meet and put food on the table. One of those jobs, coincidentally, happened to be plumbing and air conditioning work. And so growing up, that's all Vahe and I saw. The earliest memories that I have of my childhood are the memories where at 5 a.m. I would hear noise in the house. I'd barely open my eyes. I would see my dad waking up, getting ready to go out to work. And then he'd come home late at night, dusty, tired. And he'd come home, have a hot meal, spend time with us. And then he'd have to do process invoices and shoeboxes full of receipts and all the things to manage the business at night, and then go to bed to start it all over again the next day. And Vahe's dad and parents had a very similar story. And so growing up, we saw all the challenges that they faced in running their very small contracting businesses. And they did all that to give us a better future. Vahe and I were very fortunate that we ultimately ended up going to very good schools. We learned programming, software development from a very young age.
You went to Stanford, correct?
I went to Stanford, Vahe went to USC, but we learned programming even before college. We both learned when we were about 10 or 11 years old. I mean, the interesting story, about every other week when my dad would come home from work, he would stop by the bookstore. And when he would stop by the bookstore, he would buy me a book. But because he didn't know English well, he kind of just randomly picked any book out of the bookstore. And so one day he brought a book home, and I looked at the book and it said, learn Visual Basic, which is a programming language, learn Visual Basic in 21 days. And I was like, what is Visual Basic? What is programming? And I opened the book up to page 1, I read through it, and that's how I learned programming. And Vahe is a very similar story. So we learned programming from a young age. And when we went to college and we finished college and we were thinking about what we wanted to do with our lives, of course, like many software engineers, we wanted to go and work for Google and Facebook and Apple and the big tech companies. But we came back home and we saw our parents were still working hard. They still faced all the same challenges in their business. And we had seen, because we were exposed to Silicon Valley and technology, how businesses in every other industry had already solved many of the problems our parents faced. There was other software that solved these challenges for them, but contractors didn't have software that they can use. And so we decided to build what today is ServiceTitan. At the time, we didn't think there was going to be this company that there is today. We just wanted to build software for our parents to make their life easier, for all the sacrifices they had made for us. And then we would then go and work at Google or Facebook. But one thing led to another, and thankfully, despite all the hardship today, this is what we do, and there's a much bigger story here than just our dads.
Let's move on to a much broader question. Obviously, much is written about, much is talked about the tech scene in Armenia that is actually becoming a startup scene. actually. You come from the headquarters, literally, the world center of the tech industry. It's California in the United States. What are your impressions, both positives and things that need to be done? How do you see the tech scene here, for example, compared to what Silicon Valley was 20, 30 years ago? And what are the pitfalls, if any?
The most, I guess, important thing that I see here is there's a degree of, the way I describe it is a fire in the belly. Like when you see the eyes of, whether it's the kids at Tumo or it's the young adults that are dreaming big, there's this incredible glimmer in their eyes that you see. There's a hunger there that is meaningfully different than California for a variety of reasons.
And that hunger is critical for making any startup successful, because any startup is just a list of one problem, one challenge after the next, and very few companies make it. And those that do have to have the perseverance to overcome all the obstacles in their way. And I think it's very much part of the Armenian DNA, that perseverance.
Absolutely. And you couple that with a few other ingredients, mainly a relatively deep bench of engineering talent that is the foundation on top of which what any tech industry is going to be built on top of, and a worldwide diaspora that can be instrumental in giving access to global markets, because the market here is not going to be close to big enough to build any sort of tech company. But it's the combination of these things that really create the environment within which we've been able to be successful here, as well as the potential for the future looking forward.
I want to talk to you about another issue that we discussed it before the show started about, and this is a universal issue. It started off in tech, and now it's almost in every industry in Armenia, from the highest to the lowest as far as skill level, and that is labor shortages. Everyone complains about not being able to find competent enough engineers, competent physicists, depending on what field you're in. That obviously even matriculates down to the construction level, to the agricultural level. But let's just speak about your world. There has been lots of talk, and everyone knows that the only way these demands are ever going to be met is by importing a certain number of foreign engineers or foreign programmers from multiples of different countries. One, how do you see actually dealing with this consistent, just structural labor shortage? And on a more difficult question is this society ready to have non-Armenians in the tens of thousands working in industries like this, some of whom will be frankly making a lot more money than local people here do on their normal jobs?
If I can, it's interesting. Today, every company is transitioning to become a tech company. Clearly, you have pure play technology companies that are tech companies from the beginning, but even now, all the non-tech companies, the Walmarts of the world, the FedExes of the world, from the enterprise to the small businesses, they are all transitioning to become tech businesses. They're all building out huge engineering teams and building tech-enabled businesses, because if they don't, they will become extinct. They will not be able to compete, and they will go away. The world is becoming all about tech, and as a result, you're absolutely right, there is a huge shortage of skilled technical people.
All over the world, you mean?
All over the world. Today, there is so much demand from the biggest tech companies, the Facebooks and Googles of the world, to the smaller tech startups, ServiceTitans of the world, to even smaller tech companies, plus all the demand from the Walmarts and the FedExes of the world. Is just an insatiable demand for tech talent. And you're talking about companies in aggregate whose market caps are trillions and trillions of dollars. And so when the opportunity is that big, the question is, would we want Armenia to benefit from that opportunity? And I think the answer is overwhelmingly yes. And I think Armenia is actually uniquely positioned to be one of the beneficiaries of this global trend for the following reasons. One, you have deep expertise in science and math here in Armenia. Two, these jobs are very high-paying jobs. They're among the highest-paying jobs in the world. Three, this is one of the only jobs that I know that you can do an extraordinary job in this profession remotely. And we're an example of this, where we have 200 amazing Titans here in Armenia that work remotely with our team in LA and teams around the world. And many other companies have that here as well. You can do it remotely, and you can learn this at any age. We learned at 9, 10, 11. So many other kids today are learning at the same age. And now not only can you have people in their 20s and 30s that have high-paying jobs where there is unlimited demand. All of Armenia, every single person in Armenia could become an engineer, and there still wouldn't be enough engineers in this world. But even the 12-year-old who learns to code can now get all kinds of projects and jobs on all those online marketplaces where they can make amazing amounts of money to support their families from a very young age.
You said something that I think will sound odd to some people here. It's positive and in odd in a positive way. You talked about how educated, how you've had apparently good luck in finding very educated people. But I can tell you as a parent here, systematically there are educational issues in the sense that the education system here is not up to par. It is not producing people with the skills for the jobs of tomorrow. To the extent that I can tell you that many parents just take this upon themselves, whether it's extra classes, special private schools, whether it's TUMO, whether it's this is the golden ticket as you described it. So I think we need to upgrade the education system dramatically. The education system in Armenia was far stronger. Many people don't like to admit it in Soviet times as far as the quality of people you would produce. So from your perspective, from a business person's perspective, you had a magic wand to reform the education system in Armenia. What would you do?
Primary school teachers. The kids coming out of high school today, based on indirect observations, just speaking to folks, do not have the requisite levels of math, of English, for our business to be able to then go into engineering degrees in universities and so forth. I think that's the area where we would get the most leverage, because what happens is you need to have a baseline in order to then learn these skills. And so if we can solve that primary education gap, even if the universities aren't where they need to be, the kids would have an opportunity to learn by themselves. They would be able to self-educate. There's all sorts of other, you mentioned TUMO, there's a variety of other institutions that can fill those gaps. What's very hard to fill is that primary mathematics, primary language, things like that.
What do you mean specifically by primary mathematics? Is this trigonometry? Is it, okay.
Yeah, I mean, the baseline of mathematics would just be algebra, trigonometry. We're not even talking about advanced calculus or anything like that. Fundamentals of logic, which is what engineering is based on, software engineering is based on. It's those types of things that are the building blocks that you absolutely need to then build more on top of.
Thank you for that answer. I'm going to ask a more holistic question. You live as I said, in the center of the tech world in California. I've been lucky enough to both live in California and in Armenia. So, and there's a certain sort of a certain zeitgeist or something in the air that allows a quote unquote tech scene, startup scene. You cannot create it out of, it's hard to do it, for example, in totalitarian states. In fact, there's outside of China that it's a unique situation. There's really no example there of a tech industry that is competitive from a country that doesn't have freedom. We are in this country an island of freedom in a sea of tyranny, surrounded by two neo-fascist states to the east and west of us, but we're this island of freedom. What, from your perspective, what is the interplay between success in your industry and the freedom that people need to operate in total?
Well, I think the spirit of innovation really only can exist in a land where people can dream and people can have a hope for the future and see a path towards realizing that dream. And so that's really fundamental, and I think that's why you see what you just observed in terms of where innovation really comes from. Beyond that, from a freedom perspective, there's a direct link towards having technologically advanced societies that can take advantage of communications technologies, the magic of the internet, upcoming things like crypto that are really going to be enablers of liberty, and a foundation on top of which freedom can really truly be realized. And I feel like that's more part of the big reason why Armenia is seeing this kind of growth in this industry, is because people do have that ability to dream, and they're able to see a brighter future.
I'm going to ask you a question that's really hard for you to answer, because it's sort of I'm going to ask you to solve a question that you guys are, of a problem that you guys are likely to be creating. It's a good problem, but there are societal impacts to the work that you do. And we are living in, and this is a practical everyday occurrence in Armenia, where you see someone at 20, 30 something, usually in 20 something, that will make, someone in your industry specifically, that will make 8, 10 times more than their parents. That is a good thing on one level, but it's also, it sort of upends the moral order, the societal order of things, which sometimes is good, but sometimes can be not so good. How do you think the society needs to deal or even understand this? And I'm not even getting to the craziness that can happen with, IPOs and people getting shares and instant millionaires and all that you will eventually get to as these startups become public, and that's coming. How do you prepare for this, and how do you deal with this in a way where you're not creating more problems than the issues that you're solving?
I think this is interesting. It brings up the concept of freedom and justness, etc. And there are many components to these things. I don't want to get into all of them, but the one I will focus on is we believe very strongly in equality of opportunity. And I think that's what this is really about. Giving every child in Armenia, giving every teenager, even every adult in Armenia, the opportunity to learn a very important and in-demand skill that could then be applied however they want to dream. Whether it's building business software like we do, or building consumer software, or changing healthcare, or changing retail, or changing any industry, making any kind of impact in this world. This is the great equalizer, is education and opportunities like this. And one of the great things is this will lead to prosperity for this country that we all love so much. And the impact will be magnified that as all these dreamers go and pursue their dreams and pour in all this blood, sweat, and tears into building their vision of the future, and then employing many other people who follow in their footsteps and help contribute to that dream. And when they create the prosperity that they get in return, what I see is most of it gets reinvested into the next generation. And certainly Vahe and I and many Titans do this in a very big way. I've seen pretty much every other founder that I know invest very heavily back into the communities that are important to them. And I think this generation of Armenians that participate in the tech scene will continue to do it for this country. And soon, hopefully, there will be many companies that are of Armenia that are changing the world.
I want to talk to you about this. It's a question that might upset some people, but I think you guys are essentially represent, you and your industry and your colleagues, sort of a new generation of wealth. I can make a case that the Armenian billionaire set internationally, with a few exceptions here or there, have failed this country. They have not carried the burden that they need to carry. And it makes me think that we don't really have billionaires, we just have a lot of poor people that have a lot of money. And that's different than being really wealthy. What is the responsibility? What's the moral responsibility that people that have great wealth, or specifically people in your industry, have? One, to develop the country, and two, to at the same time create a just society?
That is a deep question. I mean, beyond the philosophical aspects of whether or not a business has moral responsibility and whatnot, what I would say is, first and foremost, rapid economic development is by far the most important thing beyond any other considerations for a variety of reasons. But beyond the economics, especially within tech, I would argue the cultural impact that this industry has the potential to make, whether it's from pushing the ideals of a meritocracy, or it's being able to transform and give hope to people, or it's just having, to your point, better role models for kids to look up to. I feel like there's a very strong cultural impact that could be had. And then beyond that, building a technologically sophisticated society has intrinsic value for that society. It empowers it to be able to stand up to tyranny, to stand up to injustice. I mean, just look at the role tech has played, whether it's the Arab Spring or it was our own Velvet Revolution. Technology played a massive role. And so if we're talking about from a moral perspective, from a justice perspective, I think it all comes down to empowerment, both at the individual level and at a societal level, which I would argue will allow it to ultimately create a much more just society.
Well, I'm usually not in the habit of complimenting people that I interview, but many times I've said that we need to, in the post-war period actually, we need to redefine the conception of patriotism. And patriot is not someone who sits behind the desk and puts up Facebook, the Facebook fidais and that kind of nonsense. It's the patriot is the one who creates a job. It's the one who houses a refugee, who finds a veteran a job. And I can't think of better poster boys for patriotism, for being responsible patriots than the two of you. So I want to thank you for your work.
Thank you. Eric, thank you so much for the kind words. Very humbled and grateful to hear that. And this country means the world to Vahe and I, and we will do everything we can for this community.
Thank you for joining us. This is your host, Eric Hacopian of CivilNet. Thank you for joining us this afternoon.